Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Connolly and I'm the Scholarships Manager for the General Sir John Monash Foundation. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Just to let you know that we will be recording this session and the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel for all of you to refer back to, and we'll make sure to email that link to the recording via email to those of you that are signed up to our scholarship and application mailing list. We should be able to post the video of tonight's session by the end of this week. I'll start today with an acknowledgement of country. The office of the General Sir John Monash Foundation sits on Wurundjeri country, which is also where I'm signing on from today to this webinar. And I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land in which we're privileged to have our working base and pay my respects to the Wurundjeri elders, past, present, and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners across this vast continent on which our scholars, supporters, board members and staff call home and where we often meet as a national organisation. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Lauren and I'm the Scholarships Manager for the General Sir John Monash Foundation. I oversee and manage the application and selection process for our scholarships. With me tonight is Dr. Karen McConalogue, our Executive Director of the John Monash Foundation Leadership Academy. Karen will be monitoring the Q&A thread throughout this session to respond to any questions, and we'll also hear from her a little later on to talk more about our Leadership Academy as well. Tonight's webinar is part one of a two-part series that we conduct each year about our scholarship and the application process. In today's session, I wanted to go further depth in about the scholarship and what the benefits are, a bit more about our selection process and what our tips are for applying. You can post any questions that you have throughout the session, but there'll also be a chance for you to ask either Karen or myself some questions at the end of the session as well. Please keep your microphone muted until then if you can. And I'll tell you a bit more about the second part of this webinar series at the end of tonight's session. I'll begin with this quote from General Sir John Monash, who is the inspiration for our foundation. The privilege of education carries great responsibilities. It is given not for individual benefit alone, but to befit persons for the higher duties of citizenship and for roles of leadership in all fields to make Australia great. This quote frames the way we think about the scholarship and the way we work at the foundation. The General Sir John Monash Foundation was established over 20 years ago, and it's built on the philosophy of John Monash, that the high level of education that we strive to attain is there in order to contribute positively to the country. The qualities of John Monash inspire our scholarship selection criteria as well. So why apply for the John Monash Scholarship? The great thing is that it's open to applicants of any age, studying any discipline, and you can choose to go anywhere in the world. We encourage our applicants to choose universities and programs that are world-leading in the discipline area that they want to study in. John Monash scholars benefit from joining a professional and international network for career opportunities, and you'll also receive ongoing career support and professional development programs through our Leadership Academy. If you receive a John Monash Scholarship, you will get $100,000 for each year of study, up to a maximum of $300,000 over 3 years. And you can use those funds to flexibly cover tuition fees, living expenses, and related study costs. In addition to the scholarship, you will also receive a travel stipend, which contributes to flights from your current location to wherever your study destination is. And you'll also join a global network of 300 scholars and get the opportunity to connect with like-minded leaders through our Leadership Academy. And speaking of our Leadership Academy, I'll hand over to Karen now to give you a bit of an introduction to what that is.
Thank you, Lauren, and good evening to everyone that's attending tonight. Great to see you all online. The John Monash Scholarship, it's a program. It's not just the money for the scholarship and the education component. We pick our scholars partly based on their leadership and their leadership potential. And we truly do back them into that. So as well as the education, you will get access to the John Monash Foundation's Leadership Academy. It is a program that will give you opportunities to be involved in things like mentoring programs. We have a career guidance program. We've just launched an executive coaching program, which scholars who are, particularly those that might be thinking about a pivot in their career, are finding quite useful. But we also run other events throughout the year, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of those in a minute. But we are very thankful to have the patronage of our former Prime Minister, the Honourable Julia Gillard AC, who some of you may know since her days as Prime Minister has gone on to lead in other parts of civic society and is involved in her own Institute for Women in Leadership, which is run out of London. So she's very powerful on the world stage when it comes to leadership, and we're very grateful for her patronage. Lauren, if you could pop on to the next slide. Just wanted to show some examples of some of the activities that we do have. So the Leadership Academy, you get access to that as soon as you're announced as a John Monash Scholar. So when we have our presentation ceremony at the beginning of the year with the new scholar cohort, we run a 2-day leadership program with the brand new scholars. So even before people have started studying or gone out overseas, the Foundations of Leadership program starts pretty much straight away. And that's a great way for the scholar community to come together because, of course, they come from all over the country, to come together in Canberra and have 2 days to get to know each other and do some leadership training. So that's sort of at the front end. And then we do run programs throughout the year as the mentoring, career guidance, those sorts of things. We run webinars as well on special topics in leadership that happen. Those are virtual, of course. And again, we have not scholars just all around the country in terms of our alumni. We also have scholars all around the world who are studying, and some of our alumni work overseas. So we do try to do some things virtually so we can try to get as many people from the community together as we can. The John Monash Scholars now a total 300 people, so it's growing every year, and it's becoming quite a big and diverse group with over 20 years of awarding scholarships. Some of the other programs that we run, so sort of in the later part of the year, we usually run a symposium where we get scholars together. It's largely a networking opportunity to hear from other scholars about what they're doing and work out who there is people that you might like to network with and get to know. And we had a fantastic response to what I thought was going to be quite a small regional symposia in Denmark in September. And we ended up with 40 scholars that were able to come to that. So that was a fantastic opportunity for particularly the new scholars, the 2026 scholars, to meet a whole lot of the scholars in the field and learn more about the studies that were coming up, as well as hear from some of our alumni about working overseas. So these are just sort of some of the examples. We will be running a major symposium in December in Melbourne, and all the new John Monash Scholars for 2027 will be invited to come to that. So there's these sort of big events where you get to meet lots of scholars, as well as webinars and direct support in terms of mentorship and coaching. So just to give you a flavour of what's on offer. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Karen. So if you're interested in applying for the scholarship, you will need to meet our minimum entry criteria, which is listed on this slide. So you'll need to be an Australian citizen to be eligible for the scholarship, and you'll need to have already completed, or at least will complete by the end of this year, an undergraduate degree from an Australian university. You'll also need to be planning to commence the postgraduate study that you'd like to be funded by the scholarship at some point in 2027. So any programs that commence later this year would not be eligible for this upcoming round of scholarships. There's some information on this slide here about some programs that would not be eligible for funding, such as short courses or postdoc positions. And there's also just a note there too that you would not be able to hold a Rhodes, Fulbright or Ramsay scholarship at the same time as if you were holding a John Monash scholarship. John Monash scholars demonstrate academic excellence, outstanding leadership potential, and they also have a strong vision to build Australia's capabilities for the future, which are all based on the qualities modelled by General Sir John Monash. So to be successful in your application, you must demonstrate excellence through academic or professional examples, leadership through leadership examples in different environments, and citizenship, which is how to plan to make a positive impact on and contribute to Australia and society more broadly. Importantly, you need to be able to argue the merits of your chosen course and university and how they're best positioned to drive progress in your field of study. So the John Monash Scholarship gives you the opportunity to study anywhere in the world. Your application should justify how your chosen program and university is the best fit for your future career, how they advance progress in your field, or how they might contribute to your area of study and positively impact Australia. You can see some examples on the screen of where some of our scholars have chosen to study. And we also have partnerships with select international universities. So if you were to complete your studies at one of those universities, you would be eligible for additional fee discounts and bursaries on top of your scholarship. So when you're considering which program and university you'll choose, you should know how much funding that you'll be eligible to receive with the scholarship. We award 1, 2, or 3-year scholarships, and that's directly tied to the duration of your chosen program. So if your master's course duration was 1 year, you would be eligible to receive a 1-year scholarship worth $100,000. If you were to choose to study a PhD program, you would receive $100,000 each year for 3 years for a total value of $300,000, which is the maximum value scholarship. You could not, however, receive a 3-year scholarship for a program that was only 1 year in duration. You do not need to have applied already or have an offer before submitting your application to the scholarship. We do expect that you've done your research on the admissions process, the timeline, and the eligibility requirements of the program, though. And this is a brief overview of our selection process and the timeline. So our online application portal has already opened, and so you can go in now, make an account, and look at what the application form is this year. And we'll be accepting applications through until the 30th of June at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. We usually receive around 350 applications in total during this window. And I really do recommend that you submit the application well in advance of the deadline. From that point, we will invite around 100 applicants to the first round of interviews. Interviews in that round are held around the country with a panel of guests from a range of disciplines, and that will be held over several weeks in September. After that, 40 successful candidates will progress to the national interviews, which are held in October in Sydney and Melbourne. And then finally, each year between 14 and 20 extraordinary candidates will be awarded a John Monash Scholarship. A notification of that will come in early December. So to start things off, you will need to submit an online application. And in addition to answering the application questions, you'll also need to provide some documents. And those are your resume, any official academic transcripts for completed or currently in progress study. You'll need letters of recommendation from 3 references who know you in academic, professional, or personal capacities, and a budget plan completed with the template that we'll provide to you. And that demonstrates how you plan to manage your finances for the duration of your study. We do always get asked for more information about the application form or if we have any tips. So I have included some on this slide. I won't read out all of them, but just some of the key ones. So when you're thinking about what program to choose, I do encourage to do your in-depth research. You might want to answer in your application, why have you chosen the university that you have? Is it because it's the best in your field of study? Is it close in proximity to locations or research groups or other experts that would enhance your study experience or are otherwise not available in Australia? Just thinking, really make the case of the research that you've done into maybe similar programs around the world or in Australia and how you've come to narrow down on this 1 or 2 programs that you're proposing to the scholarship. I would also encourage you to choose your referees carefully. They should be the most senior people who can speak to your excellence and leadership capabilities. You can select the most appropriate combination of academic, professional, and personal referees based on your current career stage. We just don't recommend submitting only personal preferences. But if you have been studying at university for the last few years, perhaps mostly academic referees are more appropriate to your experience. Whereas if you completed your degree several years ago and you've been in the workforce for a while, perhaps mostly professional referees are appropriate for your circumstance. So just choose a range that you feel will showcase your best abilities. Finally, as I mentioned already, please allow plenty of time to prepare and submit your application. Take note of the deadline. Ensure that your referees are prepared and complete their part promptly, because we can't accept late applications, unfortunately. Things move very quickly once that deadline passes. So as I mentioned just a short while ago, our application portal is currently open at the moment as of late last week, which is very exciting. In a few weeks' time, we will be holding a second live webinar, which will be on the 4th of June. This is a dedicated Q&A session with our scholar alumni and also other staff at the Foundation. So we'll hear from the scholars in depth about their application and interview experience, and also what it's like to be a John Monash Scholar and getting involved in the Leadership Academy. Just be mindful of that deadline of the 30th of June and try to avoid having to do anything last minute as well. So if you aren't already signed up to our scholarships mailing list, scan the QR code on the screen to join. The registration link for that June webinar I just mentioned will be included in the next email, and you can register to sign up for that session as well. So Karen and I are happy to take some questions from the online audience now. There should be a space for you to post a question in the Q&A space. I don't know, Karen, if we have any already.
Sorry, just need to jump back to the screen. We only had one already, which someone asked, if you already have a master's degree, can you apply through our scholarship program for another or different master's program to do overseas? The answer is yes. For that one, I've also popped in the chat the link through to our How to Apply page on our website. And if we don't get to your question tonight, or you come off the webinar and go, oh, actually, I should have asked, I've also popped our roll account that you can email us at, which is scholarships@johnmonash.com. So I've put both of those in the chat if people want to pick those out of the chat. But you can either put a question there, or we're happy for you to, if you can, come off mute and camera and ask a question.
So I might have to fiddle with the settings to do that. While I do that, Karen, maybe there's a question you could answer that was submitted in advance. Someone asked, is it okay if all professional references come from the same workplace? Would my application be stronger if I had a mix of other referees?
Yeah, it's a good question. We do get a lot of questions around referees, and there's no right or wrong answer. But generally speaking, we ask for 3 referees because we're looking for different perspectives and people that know you in a different capacity. So if you think about our selection criteria, we're looking for academic excellence. So maybe one of those referees is someone that's taught you and can speak to your academic excellence, or maybe that person's in your workplace and can speak to your professional excellence. Our second pillar that we're looking for is leadership. Now, maybe that leadership, the best person to speak about that isn't in your study or life or your professional life. Perhaps you lead in a community setting with a society or something that you're attached to. Maybe someone there is then a really good referee to talk about that aspect, to talk about you holistically, but particularly maybe focusing on your leadership skills. And then, of course, the third pillar is citizenship. And again, maybe it's not your workplace that's best placed to talk about what you do outside of work and how you're giving back to the community. So think carefully about, my advice would be, think carefully about what we're looking for in the selection criteria and who in your life might be best placed to talk about that particular skill or trait. So we usually find if you have 3 people from the same, if it's all from your workplace, for example, they might not know you as holistically to cover some of those other aspects that we might get a better response from someone else. So think about, my best advice would be think about the selection criteria and then who best can speak to those traits as a referee.
Okay, so we've had a few more questions now. This next one, is the scholarship open to New Zealand citizens usually residing in Australia? Unfortunately, no. We only accept applications from Australian citizens at the moment. This next question, perhaps Karen, you could answer this one again. When selecting scholarship recipients, is there a consideration of breadth or diversity of scholars?
Yeah, we do. We obviously fund in every discipline area. So in terms of the diversity, we look across the whole breadth. We're looking for excellence and leadership and citizenship, regardless of discipline. So there's that true breadth. We are a merit-based scholarship. We're not an equity-based scholarship, so we don't have quotas that are focused around equity. But it's certainly something that selection panels will take into consideration. So there's this, we do see a huge breadth right across Australian society that apply for this scholarship. We have, some people that have gone through private school and had quite a privileged education so far, but we also have people that have come from real, disadvantage and have just excelled as well. So we get that breadth of the community applying as well. So yes, we don't have quotas, but we certainly do see a breadth, and we welcome that breadth and diversity in our applications.
This next one, if I have a previous Fulbright scholarship for a master's degree and now I want to apply to the John Monash Scholarship for a PhD, is that allowed? Yes, we do currently allow that. If you've held a scholarship previously, what we really care about is that you can't hold more than one scholarship for the same course of study. So that example would be fine.
Someone else is asking, can you tell us a little bit more about what the referees are asked to complete? And is it an online form, or do they have to write a letter? And help us choose the best people to to prepare them. So I think I've answered a bit about maybe picking who you should choose, the best people. But Lauren, did you want to say about how that process actually works, including how it automates off the system?
Of course. So in your application form, there's a section specifically for referees. And when you open that, in order to attach a referee to your application, you just write in their name and their email address. Once you've done that, an email will send to that email address describing, you've been selected as a referee for this applicant. This is what you need to do, and these are the instructions to follow, and this is also the deadline that we'd like you to complete that by. So the task of the referee is they have their own sort of separate portal. They don't see the rest of your application. They just get this referee form where we ask them to answer a couple of questions like the capacity that they know you in, how long they've known you for, etc. And then they also need to upload they need to upload a letter to that form as well. And the letter is 1 to 2 pages, and it's really just talking about how you demonstrate the qualities of a John Monash scholar as described on our website, but we explain all of that to the referees in that email. Once that's submitted in your application portal, you'll be able to see that that reference is completed, but you won't be able to see the details of what they wrote. And that's so, to give referees the space to be honest. But you might, if you're really close with your referees and you chat offline and maybe you give them pointers about what you'd like them to include in a letter, that's perfectly fine. It's not a secret if you don't want it to be, but we do give referees the ability to submit those letters and that form directly to the foundation without you seeing. So over the course of the next 2 months, while applications are open, just keep an eye on that reference section of your application where you've entered all their details, and just make sure that you're tracking that they are actually completing their part as well, because if you don't get all 3 referees successfully completed by the deadline, that would be considered an incomplete application, and we don't have the ability to chase up any late references on your behalf. So just be mindful of that.
I might just add, there's a question, and someone's just joined late as well. Question is this being recorded? Yes, you will get access to the recording if you missed the beginning or you've missed part of it. And I see someone's dropped out a few times. The recording will be available, so you'll get that. I might pick up the next one, Lauren. It's about a co-sponsored Coachwell PhD program. So the question is, would a PhD co-sponsored by an international university with an Australian university be eligible? Melbourne University has a split PhD that allows candidates to enrol with them and also study overseas. We've had this question come up before. There is no advantage to enrolling in the overseas university. As an Australian citizen, which you have to be to apply for this scholarship, you would get free tuition through the Australian university in which you would enrol. Unless there are this program has huge fees attached to it, so there is no advantage in enrolling overseas, in which case you would enrol through the University of Melbourne, in which case you would be ineligible for this program. So we are looking for study that is done overseas. So you have to go overseas. So something like a Coachwell where you're between Australia and another country wouldn't be eligible for this scholarship. And there's another PhD one, just can you apply for a scholarship for a PhD commencing in the latter part of 2027? Yes, you can. Because PhDs largely, most universities allow you to start on any day. So you can literally commence on the 1st of January or you can commence on the 31st of December. As long as it is in the year 2027, that will be fine. Whereas taught programs do have usually, quite fixed teaching terms. So that one is, the PhDs can be a little bit different. Have we got other ones coming in there?
This next one, are academic referees preferred over professional referees? For reference, I'm an early career scientist who recently joined the professional workforce. I feel my academic referees might be better placed to talk about academic excellence. There is no preference at the foundation over what the makeup of your referee combo is. Our only advice, as I said earlier, is don't choose for all three referees, all three being personal references. So if you feel that academic referees would be able to better speak to your capabilities, your excellence, the qualities that we look for in John Monash scholars, then by all means you can choose them. It's just a matter of what you feel will be the best combination that represents you outside of your own answers in your application form. So I hope that answers that, but people tend to get quite specific about questions for references. So if you would like to follow up, please feel free to email that scholarship's address on the screen, and I'd be happy to go into further detail. This next inquiry, hello, is there a maximum number of PhD scholarships that can be awarded? I assume that is. And alternatively, how many people who go on to study a PhD program are successful on average, or is it dependent on the pool of candidates? It is dependent on the pool of candidates. The amount of people applying for 1 year, 2 year, Masters or PhDs fluctuates every year. We also don't have a particular quota. We don't have a set number of scholarships that are awarded this year. Every year, and that is to give us flexibility to award scholarships based on the quality of the applicant pool. That being said, PhD scholarships, or the 3-year scholarship, is obviously the more expensive scholarship, so we may award a couple less every year compared to a 1-year scholarship, but there is no cap or maximum quota that we're working towards. If it's a really strong year for PhD applicants, that may mean that we award more 3-year scholarships.
Adam M has his hand up, for a little while. Adam, if you're able to unmute now, feel free to jump in. The floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Adam.
Yeah, okay, hi. I've got just 2 questions. So are dual masters programs eligible? Is I guess the first one.
Yes.
Okay.
what our preference is that when you say it's a dual master, it's recognised by the university or the university's plural that it's a joint degree, rather than you picking 2 one-year masters that are otherwise separate and mushing them together.
Yep. Okay. So is there a method for referees to provide offline copies of their responses? I'm conscious that referral requests sent to government official emails have a tendency to get blocked from the internal networks. Is there a way that this has been dealt with in the past, or?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens every year. It actually happens most often with defence email addresses. So if anyone will be asking someone who has it, yes, funny that. Please just tell them to your referee to reach out to that scholarship's email address, and I'd be more than happy to help them submit something offline.
Acknowledge. One just follow on from that. So on your website, the successful candidates generally have listed some sort of prefix before their title of John Monash Scholar. So like, I think one is like Selman Cohen. Are these specific organizations that are assisting in funding the program, or what's the correlation there with that sort of title?
Yeah, so the named scholarships is how we recognise our partners who contribute to the scholarship fund. It's something that we assign the named scholarships to the candidates. It's not anything that you need to be concerned about. So it's not that you need to target, say, the Wesfarmers Scholarship because you think you'd be a great I don't know if someone's just come off mute, but I can hear myself being echoed. So it's just something that we name to recognise those donors, and it may mean that, you know, in the future, let's continue using the example of the Wesfarmers Scholarship, that you will be invited to some Wesfarmers events relevant to the foundation, but otherwise it's not anything that an applicant needs to worry about when they're applying for the scholarship.
We do have all our partners list. We do have all the partners listed on our website. So if you jump on there, there's a partnership page and you can see. So it's everyone from, we've got federal government, state government, big corporates, other foundations, individual philanthropists. There's a whole range right across civil society that fund us, as well as the big sort of government scholarships that were kicked us off. Claire's got a hand up, but I might come back to you in a minute, Claire. We might just take a few. You're welcome, Adam. Might just take a few of the written ones. Next question, I think, is where do strong candidates typically fall short when justifying their chosen university or program? Did you want to take that one, Lauren?
Yeah, I think there's a tendency to maybe be a bit too general in this part, and so it might be, an example is Oxford University attracts a number of applicants every year, and sometimes the applicant can justify that there's a particular lecturer that they want to work with. There's a research group that's only at Oxford that's working in this specific niche field, and that's why Oxford is the right choice. And I'd say that those explanations and justifications are generally stronger. Saying Oxford just because it's the best ranked university, or something else, some other reason that's kind of general, is where people tend to fall short. I've just lost my train of thought. Karen, do you have any other tips in terms of that justification?
Yeah, I think one thing that's very clear to me, someone that worked in the university sector for a long, long time, the universities appear on all sorts of ranking lists. So it's quite easy to find out, if you want to do robotics, for example, it's quite easy to find out who are the best universities globally to study robotics. So if someone comes and says, I want to go to that university because it's a really top-rate university, that's great, but is it any good at robotics? So it needs to make sense in terms of, you know, we're sending people to get the best education anywhere in the world. And so it should align that the program that you want to study or the topic you want to study is reflected in the excellence of that institution. So, you know, sometimes I wish we saw more diversity of people applying to different universities that are particular. They might be very niche. So, for example, we've got a music composer that's at the Juilliard in New York. Now, it's a very bespoke school, but it's world leading in music composition. So that's an example of where it's the right match, even though it might be a university you've not heard of. It is actually globally leading. So that's sort of to give you an example of where we sort of see a good match between program, candidate, and university.
Yeah. And I would say as well that the interview panelists will be a mix of backgrounds from academia, professional life, etc. Usually they'll be able to tell if, if you're able to justify that the University of blah, blah in Sweden is the best in the world for, let's say, robotics, and someone else says that, the University of Oxford is the best in the world for robotics. Generally, the panel will be able to tell whether or not there is a better university that you could have chosen. So it's really about being thorough in your justification of that. Might just do one more commented question, then we'll go back to those two people with their hands up. This Cooper asks, if I'm already studying a master's in Australia, but I want to pause it for the John Monash Scholarship study, does that still make me eligible? Yes, that would be fine. If you're currently undertaking study, as long as you've completed at least one degree by the time that your scholarship study starts, and your educational background will qualify you for that program as well, that's not an issue for us.
Can I add though, strategically, you do find with university degrees that people usually do get higher marks in subsequent postgraduate degrees than they did in their undergraduate. So strategically, if you're doing quite well in that master's, it might be to your own advantage to complete it and actually if you're demonstrating marks that are a grade point average above where your undergraduate was, there could be strategic advantage to coming in once you've finished that master's. So I'll just throw that into the mix there too.
Okay, so I think we might throw to Claire, who has her hand up in the chat or in the meeting.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Lauren and Karen. My apologies, the chat's not working for me. That's why I've got my hand up. So thanks for taking my question. I just have a question about trying to understand a little bit more about the qualities of the John Monash Foundation and how I can best demonstrate alignment to that. So I was just wondering if you could define in some more tangible terms some examples of what academic excellence and leadership might look like. So are we talking here in the sense of academic excellence, like grade point average? And also in leadership, are you looking at sort of traditional forms of leadership in community, or might that be thought leadership or other ways that one might demonstrate leadership? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I've just brought back the relevant slide on the screen, which has a couple of different examples under each of those. We don't have a threshold mark to apply for the scholarship, and so we want to allow room in that excellence category. That excellence can come in many different forms, academic being one that sort of people spring to mind the most, but there's also lots of examples of excellence that can be demonstrated elsewhere. So as it says on the screen, for academic excellence, that might be, outstanding results. It might be maybe a journal publication, maybe you're first or second author, maybe you've earned a prize at university, or maybe you've done an exhibition, dependent on your study field, that's, demonstrating excellence. Maybe you've demonstrated excellence in various ways in your workplace. It can be a number of different things. Leadership as well. Leadership will probably be relevant to your current stage of life, and our selection criteria also allows for that as well. So if you've just been studying at university straight out of high school, perhaps your leadership examples are what you've had exposure to through university, student clubs, etc. Maybe it's, you're involved in community sports, or you volunteer in your spare time, those kinds of leadership experiences. If you're a few years out of university and you've been in the workforce for a number of years, perhaps there's leadership examples that you can demonstrate. Maybe you've managed staff, maybe you've led a project. So leadership can encompass a whole range of things. And to your point about thought leadership, leadership can also be demonstrated in a number of different ways as well. So we want to make space in this selection criteria, knowing that we attract applicants from lots of different study fields, that we want to make space that what leadership looks like in fine arts is just as highly regarded as what leadership might look like in the scientific community. So it's sort of a little broad by design, which I understand might be a little bit intimidating, but the purpose of that is to allow everyone to demonstrate excellence and leadership in their particular field. And then in terms of citizenship, that's probably more forward-looking, and it's more about what do you hope to achieve in your career? How is that of benefit to Australian society? And that can be maybe really clear for some fields, like Australia does not have the level of expertise in space that other countries do. So that's what I'd like my impact to be. And perhaps it's less tangible, like it would be great if Australia had a greater wealth of knowledge in dramatic arts, or I want to contribute to the performing arts community in Australia, and make it flourishing in 20 years time. So but yeah, citizenship is again that sort of forward projection of where you see yourself, and how you see that this study that you're proposing to undertake will eventually be of benefit to the country. So I hope that sort of answered that question a little bit. I might throw to Callie now, who also has their hand up.
Hi, thank you so much for your orchestration of the session. It's been, really interesting to obviously hear the different, thoughts. I was interested to understand, I guess, just logistically speaking to the scholarship, obviously mindful that it doesn't, isn't reliant on already having acceptance to a university, but obviously looking towards, the prerequisites and the likes. A lot of them do obviously have a pretty long kind of, lead time and prerequisites required in terms of, GMAT scores and, obviously working through acceptance and things like that. How would you recommend navigating that concurrent to the scholarship application? Is it, does the scholarship bypass that? Is that then, something that's still kind of considered by the university? How does that kind of work in tandem?
Yeah, sure. So the scholarship doesn't often change university admissions outcomes, I would say. There's certain areas where it can be a deciding factor, especially in the research. If you're a student coming with some of your own funding, that can be quite attractive to a university. But if you're applying for master's postgraduate programs, that may not be a factor that the university considers. So I would be sort of viewing the scholarship application separately to the university admission, particularly in terms of entry requirements. You want to make sure that you're reaching out to the university, if possible, speaking to admissions teams, speaking to supervisors, or whatever is relevant to your program of study to ensure your eligibility, because having the scholarship may not change if you don't get an offer for the university. Often having a scholarship won't change that. So it is important that you really put your best foot forward and make sure that you're not applying for a program that's way out of the league of what you're qualified for. That being said, if you were to be successful in receiving a scholarship and you did not get an offer from the university that you wanted, it does happen from time to time, especially when you're applying to some of the top universities in the world. That is when myself and other people at the foundation will help you to come up with another option that still meets your goals, but also make sure that you can make use of the scholarship. So don't worry too much about that. And just because you mentioned the GMATs and things like that, which seem to be coming, I don't know, in the last year, a lot of the scholars have I've had a lot of discussions with scholars about GMAT in particular. If that is a requirement, or if other additional factors or requirements are part of your admission for a program that you're looking at, make sure you give yourself enough lead time. I think something like the GMAT you are able to take a few times, but there needs to be a gap between attempts, and if you only give yourself room for one attempt before the application deadline of your program and you don't get the score that you need, it may mean that you're not successful in getting into that university. So that's sort of why I say treat the scholarship and the application process separately. The scholarship will help you fund that program, but the university admission is its own beast, and make sure that you give yourself enough time to put your best foot forward.
Yeah, no, super clear. Thank you.
Cool. I thought there were a couple of other hands up before, but now I can't see any. So I'm happy to switch back to, we've still got a few questions in the Q&A thread.
We do. I'm powering through as many as I can, but there were some juicy ones I thought I'd leave that are sort of more valid for everybody. So there's some there. So for example, one question is, does the applicant need to have made their final decision on their course by the 30th of June, or can they have possibly two options at that time and determine later which university they're going to go to?
Yeah, so the application will give you room to put up to two preferences, so you can put two down. By the application deadline, we want you to be reasonably firm on your choice of program, because that will become important and something that the interview panels will ask you about once we get into the interviews in September and October. So you don't want to be saying in your interviews that the program you're now applying for is vastly different from what you were talking about in your written application form. That being said, it's not super, you're not locked in. And if you have multiple preferences, my advice would be just make sure that any second or beyond preferences are not a vastly different duration to what your first preference is, because if your first preference is a one-year master's program and then you decide in a few months' time that you'd now like to apply for a PhD, the scholarship that we award is based on what you've written your first preferences in your application. So we would award you a one-year scholarship based on the fact that your first preference is a one-year master's, and it's not able to be changed to a 3-year scholarship later down the line, because we've already allocated different scholarships based on the year's budget and the makeup of the cohort. So it's not something that's easy to be changed. If your subsequent preferences are also one-year programs, it's not too much of an issue. But yeah, just be careful of those differences in funding lengths. Did you have another one, Karen?
Another one on a similar theme. What happens if you are not accepted into the university you nominated in your application? Does this invalidate your scholarship if you are successful?
Okay, yeah, so I touched on this a little bit in the answer I just gave, but it does happen, so try not to panic too much. I think beyond the two preferences that you talk about in your scholarship applications, when you are submitting university applications, I think if you can apply to multiple different programs, please do so. I think it's better to have lots of choice rather than only have one application and then get an unfavorable outcome, and then we're a little bit stuck, especially as by the time that university admission outcomes are given to students, application deadlines are usually passed. It does not, if it were to happen to you that you receive a John Monash Scholarship, but then you don't get into your university of choice, it does not remove the scholarship. As I said, myself and other staff at the foundation will work with you to come up with option B or option C that still meets your objectives and goals and is still, a great program of study that will contribute positively to your career and education, but also enables you to use the scholarship that you've been awarded. So there is a process for that. It's not something that you need to worry too much about at this stage, but fear not, we will not take your scholarship away from you for that reason.
Oh, there's a few new ones just coming into the chat. Let me just come back to the top. Would it disadvantage you to apply for a different field of study as your backup option with justification if, for example, your first preference is only offered at one university in the world? So you'd have two quite different options. So rather than option 2 is similar to option 1, it's different because you can't match option 1, I guess is the question.
Yeah, it probably depends on how different they are. I think if the rationale for the choice is the same, it probably wouldn't be an issue. But if you're saying that it's a MBA as your first preference and then a Master of Dance as your second preference, it might be a little hard to reconcile how both of those things achieve your outcomes. So if you are really confused about how you might make that work, I'd be happy to answer any questions offline at the email address, and maybe we can workshop what your narrative would be. But yeah, if they're sort of broadly in the same range, and it is really about justifying how your choices of programs will help you achieve a particular goal. So yeah, I probably need to know more about that case to give you a really good answer, but I'd be happy to take questions offline. There's a question here that I can see we haven't answered from a while back. If a PhD is 4 years in length, can we apply for the scholarship to get funding for the first 3 years and manage those funds accordingly to cover the 4th year, i.e. are we still eligible? And the answer is yes. PhDs can span a number of different lengths. Some countries it's quite uniform that every PhD is completed in a certain time frame, and some countries it can be a number of years, maybe 5 or 6, not just 3. So with the scholarship, what we're saying is we can give you a maximum of 3 years of study. If your PhD takes longer than that to complete, it just means that those remaining years would be self-funded. So that might mean that you need to pick up a scholarship or some financial aid from your university or the department that you are researching in, but it's just about how you make that work. And so I think that's why we do ask in the application form for you to complete a budget template that talks about how you manage the funds, because it really puts into perspective, $300,000 sounds like a lot on paper, and then you look at your tuition fees for 5 years could be $400,000, an expensive country like the US, and suddenly 300 doesn't sound like so much, and you might have to think about how can you bridge that gap between what the scholarship will give you and how much just the tuition fees are going to cost. So short answer, if your PhD takes longer than 3 years to complete, our view is that's completely normal and that would be fine, and that doesn't make you ineligible for the scholarship. But be mindful that we have a maximum of $300,000, and if your studies take longer and cost more than that, you will have to think about how you're going to bridge that gap in funding.
Lauren, just to let you know, some of them you might not see the answers I've typed, but there will be just a little purple line that says one comment. That's usually it means I've answered it, and some we've answered as we've gone along. Let me just see. We got another one. I think there was another one that came in back up at the top that we hadn't got to. There's a few. This is a good question. Would it be useful to include work or volunteer projects, hobbies that are not directly related to your relevant field, but indicate attributes such as versatility, positive risk-taking? So would this distract from readers in a chosen, for example, in a scientific area, or would this be seen to be beneficial overall?
Yeah, absolutely. Please don't filter yourself out and all your lovely personality outside of just work and study in the application. We'd love to learn more about you as a person and your all-roundedness. I think there is a particular question in the application form that does specifically ask, what do you like to do outside of work and study or outside of what you already talked about in your application. And that might be a chance for you to say, I really love baking sourdough and giving it to friends. But also, please feel free if you feel that your improv troupe or, similar examples are a great demonstration of leadership, or perhaps you got an award through that you feel demonstrates certain attributes. Feel free to pop that in other aspects of your other parts of the application as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's one question, then I think we go back to Adam in the chat after I've done the written one. The question is a PhD program that pays a salary still eligible for the John Monash Scholarship? The answer is yes. PhD programs are very diverse across different countries and even across different institutions within a country. So you'll see all sorts of different ways that they operate, and largely that's around because a PhD is almost like an apprenticeship. And so in some universities, they do pay a sort of stipend allowance to the PhD students, as they do in Australia, for example. So that does happen at some universities, and that's fine. You'll also find at some universities, particularly in Europe, there's no tuition fees attached to doing a PhD. It's their country's way of trying to attract the best and brightest from around the world to come and study there and then hopefully retain them. So you do see that there's free tuition. So that, again, the fact that the tuition is covered doesn't make you ineligible to apply for this, because the expectation is that the scholarship is then being used for other costs, such as your living allowance, to allow you to live there for the years that you need to cover the scholarship. You may need to go to conferences, for example, to present your research. You can use your scholarship for that. So it's totally fine to be on a sort of stipendiary, some kind of payment while you're receiving the scholarship. That's absolutely fine. Adam, did you want to jump back in?
First of all, apologies for the fourth question. With respect to the international partner universities, can you explain a little more how those partnership fee waiving sort of arrangements work? I noticed you had a slide that briefly mentioned it, but I missed it.
Yeah, so that would be if you would like to do, say, an MBA at King's College London, which is one of those partners, and you're successful in receiving the John Monash Scholarship at KCL, then you would also be eligible for I think it's a £5,000 a year bursary on top of the scholarship. So once you've A, got the scholarship, and then B, gotten a full offer from that particular university, then the foundation will get in touch with that university to talk about that arrangement. So I think on our website, on this one of the scholarships pages, it goes into a bit more detail about what exactly the arrangement is with that particular partner. I think one of them is actually all of them are dependent on the program that you're studying. So say a master's program at KCL gets X amount of bursary, a PhD program at X university, the tuition fee is waived under the agreement. So it does differentiate for each partner, but it is explained in more detail on the website.
Thank you.
Another question we have in the Q&A, do all degrees have to be enrolled full-time? What happens if you need to do a part-time enrolment due to personal circumstances, reasons, for example? First thing I say on this is just bear in mind that you will be an international student on a student visa in the countries that you are visiting. Often part-time study is not allowed. There might be some programs where the study is not what we would term full-time, and I think those ones, I think Lauren would say we take them on a case-by-case basis. If you're demonstrating that's just the way the course runs, it doesn't run in another format. But generally speaking, we are funding a scholarship to allow people to do full-time study, and mostly your student visas will expect that you, in fact, legally you'll have to be a full-time student in most cases. So just bear that in mind.
Brendan, you have got your hand up.
Yeah, hi. I'm not sure if this was covered earlier, but some institutions automatically consider you for scholarships at time of application. Would that jeopardize the Monash Scholarship at all?
No, it would not. You are, apart from those major scholarships that I mentioned earlier, which are Fulbright, Ramsey Foundation Scholarship, and the Rhodes, we allow scholars to pick up extra funding, and that could be through the university. It could be another scholarship body like Rotary International also gives small grants for international study. That is perfectly fine. We just ask that those other major scholarships you can't hold at the same time as a John Monash Scholarship. And you'll probably find, depending on where you're studying, especially the UK and the USA, which are the most expensive in terms of postgraduate tuition fees, you will need extra funding as well as the John Monash Scholarship, as sometimes the tuition fees can be more per year than the scholarship. So yes, you are allowed to take those up. Isaac, okay, I think maybe that might be our last question for the session, just because we're nearing 1 hour. But yes, Isaac, how can we help? You are on mute if you're speaking.
All right, sorry. What if the uni is foreign but allows for you to study online while you're in Australia? Can you still continue the scholarship?
No, that's not eligible for funding. We don't fund online study. The purpose of the scholarship is to support all the costs associated with living and studying abroad. So it does need to be full-time in person in the other country.
Right. So if there maybe some unis allow for you to do research, come back, be based at home, then go back, such arrangement, is that covered? Is it fine?
Probably not, but if you did want me to look into a program in more detail, but generally, no, the scholarship will be funding in-person study for the duration of the course.
Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. Karen, was there any final questions that you felt would benefit from
I think I've answered them, and I did put on the beginning, but I'll just sort of, it's on screen now at the bottom under the QR code. If we didn't get to your question or I didn't answer it in the text Q&A to your satisfaction, please just reach out to us at scholarships@johnmonash.com. A lot of people have quite specific questions about their particular cases. One person I've asked to contact us because I think it's better we talk through that question live. So yes, if we haven't got to it, please shoot us a message, but we certainly do hope to see you at the next webinar where you'll get a lot more information about the process.
Great. Okay. Well, with that being said, I think we might end the session there. Thank you so much for your time tonight and your thoughtful questions. Yes, as Karen said, if there's anything we left unanswered, please email us. And the next session, which will be in early June, will also be a Q&A session, not just with us, but also John Monash scholars. So there might be a question that you'd like to ask in that session as well. But otherwise, we'll hopefully send you this recording by the end of this week, and wishing you all the best for your application. Thank you.
Thanks all. Good night.